Hi, I'm Lorianne. At my mother's funeral, my sister stood at the podium and called herself the only daughter, while I sat in the back, not even listed in the program. A week later, she showed up at my door, asking for money, after taking everything. But it didn't stop there. She forged documents, tried to sell the house, told the world I abandoned our mother, when I was the one who held her hand the night she died. What happens when the person who shares your blood rewrites your place in the family? And what do you do when silence is no longer protection, but permission? They said the service would begin at noon, but I was there by 10. I didn't want to run into Delphine before I had to. The parking lot was still mostly empty when I pulled in, the sky over Fresno already starting to sweat. I sat in my car longer than I should have, staring at the chapel doors. The air conditioning hummed in the background, steady and disinterested. I had worn the same navy suit I used to wear when I pitched to clients back in San Diego. I hadn't buttoned it in months. It felt stiff now, like armor that had stopped fitting me the moment I decided to give up that life and take care of Mom. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the welcome board. In loving memory of Maureen Greaves, remembered by her beloved daughter, Delphine Caro. That was it. No mention of me. No, survived by both daughters. Just her. I stood there for a beat too long. The woman setting up flowers asked if I was the florist. I said nothing and walked past. The chapel was quiet, except for the shuffle of programs being laid on chairs. I grabbed one. Front cover, Mom's photo from 10 years ago, the one Delphine insisted on. Inside, under family acknowledgments, it read, survived by her eldest daughter, Delphine Caro, and her devoted caregiver, Lorianne Blythe. Caregiver. Not daughter, not even youngest daughter, just caregiver. My fingers clenched the edge of the paper. I felt something between embarrassment and disbelief crawl up my throat. A whisper behind me. Two women, older, dressed in beige. Is that the nurse? No, I think she's the one who helped out. Not family, though. I didn't turn around. I folded the program once, then again, and slipped it into my purse without looking. People began arriving in clusters. Hugs, murmurs, the same tired condolences. She was a saint. She'll be missed. Such a strong woman. Most of them looked past me like I was part of the staff. Some nodded, unsure whether to say hello. At exactly noon, Delphine stepped up to the pulpit. Her dress was black but fashionable, expensive-looking, too fitted for mourning. Her mascara already ran slightly, as if she'd practiced the smudge. She cleared her throat like she was about to accept an award. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice just shaky enough to sound believable. Our mother, my mother, was the most loyal, most loving woman I've ever known. She gave everything for this family. She was my best friend. I stood in the back, near the wall, arms crossed tightly. Not once did her eyes meet mine. No one asked if I wanted to speak. There wasn't a slot for me on the program anyway. Delphine continued. She told me, just a few weeks before she passed, that I was her rock, that I made her proud every single day. I could almost hear her rehearsing those lines in her bathroom mirror. The audience nodded. A few sniffles echoed down the pews. Someone even clapped once before stopping themselves. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that held a spoon to Mom's mouth when she couldn't lift a fork. The same hands that changed her bedding at 3 a.m. The same ones that signed her hospice documents when no one else would. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I walked calmly out the side aisle and into the empty hallway. My heels clicked against the tile with every step, but nobody noticed. I found a bench by the restroom door and sat. My palms were still open in my lap, fingers curled slightly, like they were remembering how it felt to hold hers during her last breath. I thought about the night she passed, how I stayed up with her till morning, how Delphine didn't even call until noon the next day. I didn't expect gratitude. Not really. But I didn't expect erasure either. After a while, I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked back into the chapel just as the slideshow started. Delphine had selected the photos: Mom's birthdays, holidays, vacations, but not a single one with me. If I was in the background, I was cropped. If I was smiling, the frame ended just before my shoulder. There she was, our mother, smiling on screen next to Delphine in picture after picture. A curated history, a version of our family where I didn't exist. And yet, there I was, alive, breathing, watching it unfold like I'd wandered into someone else's life. They clapped when the slideshow ended. Not a standing ovation, but enough. Enough for her. She erased me in front of a room full of people, and they clapped. The applause still rang faintly in my ears as I stepped into the guest hall. The lights here were dimmer, warmer. A shallow hum of conversation floated above the soft instrumental jazz, playing from a Bluetooth speaker someone had stashed near the gift table. Round tables were dressed in off-white linen, small plates of finger food arranged neatly. I knew every detail because I had paid for every last piece of it, down to the lemon wedges beside the iced tea. I wasn't in the room more than 2 minutes before the first woman, an aunt from my father's side, I think, wrapped me in a quick hug and said, "You must be Delphine's friend, right? You did such a beautiful job helping out." Helping out. I gave her a tight smile and nodded. I didn't correct her. By the third hug and fourth person calling me such a kind volunteer, I realized Delphine had made sure I'd be remembered the way she wanted me remembered, if at all. She'd always been clever about that. Let people think what they want, as long as she laid the breadcrumbs. Near the dessert table, 2 older cousins I barely recognized were chatting. "Delphine's been incredible," one said, picking at a deviled egg. "She told me she covered everything: flowers, food, even the chapel fee. That must have cost her a fortune." The other shook her head, mouth half full. "She's always been the responsible one. Remember how she planned Grandpa's 70th? Girl doesn't play around." I stayed behind a display of roses until their voices faded. My fingers curled around the clutch bag I held, nails digging in through the fabric. I didn't need to look at my banking app. I already knew the final number: $15,168. No one else had paid a dime. Delphine hadn't held a job in almost 3 years. I moved toward the tribute table. The centerpiece was a framed photograph propped up by a brass easel, one I hadn't seen before. It was Mom's last birthday. I'd taken the picture myself. I stepped closer. She and Delphine were seated side by side, smiling. The cake sat in front of them, candles still lit. But something was off. I wasn't there. I remembered that night clearly. I sat across from them. I took the picture on my phone. I should have been visible in the mirror behind them, but in this version, the mirror was just reflectionless glare. I leaned in. The crop was precise, clean. I hadn't just been cut. I'd been replaced by blank space. "She edited me out," I said under my breath. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel grief. I didn't even feel sad. I felt cold. I turned and made my way across the room. Delphine stood near the wine table, surrounded by a cluster of guests, all smiling too much. Her voice was light, like she didn't have a care in the world. As I passed behind her, I paused just long enough to say, without looking at her, "Nice edit. Really subtle." She didn't turn, just lifted her glass, took a sip, and said, "Some of us were meant to be remembered." There it was again, that tone. Like she wasn't just claiming space, she was reclaiming history. I didn't reply. Not there. Not in front of everyone. I kept walking until I found the corner by the windows, away from the buzz and the soft music and the pretend morning. I looked out at the garden where they'd planted a new dogwood tree in Mom's honor. Delphine had ordered the plaque. It read, "In memory of Maureen Greaves, loved deeply by her daughter Delphine. Just Delphine." She didn't just steal the spotlight. She erased my place in the family story. After the last of the guests trickled out, I found myself in the back hallway again, my shoes finally silent against the carpet. The reception was over, but my mind wouldn't stop pacing. That final insult, Her name on the plaque, just hers, clung to me like smoke. It wasn't about sharing the moment. It was about being deliberately left out of it. I sat in the guest lounge beside the chapel, where the flowers had been gathered up and the last tray of sandwiches sat wilting. The air felt different there, less performative, more still. I pulled my phone from my purse, not to scroll, but to open the image I'd been keeping. A photo of a page, really. Mom's hospice schedule. My name filled every line. And in the middle of that page, there was Delphine's name, once, crossed out in my mother's own handwriting. I let my finger rest on that mark for a few seconds. Then, I looked up at the ceiling and closed my eyes. 3 weeks earlier, the house had been quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that carried weight. It was late, maybe close to 1 in the morning, when I heard her voice. Faint, like it barely cleared her lips. Lo? I was in the kitchen, still in my robe, stirring soup over the stove. I'd made a habit of prepping something warm for her in the middle of the night. She couldn't eat much, but the ritual mattered. It helped us both pretend the end wasn't quite here yet. I set the ladle down, wiped my hands on the towel at my hip, and walked down the hallway. The house creaked gently with age, as if holding its breath. She was propped up on the adjustable bed, the lamp casting a soft yellow pool across her frail frame. Her eyes were clearer than usual, but her skin looked thinner somehow, more transparent. I didn't think you were awake, I said gently. I can't sleep. She smiled weakly. My thoughts are louder than the oxygen machine. I pulled the blanket up around her shoulders and sat beside her. Her hand reached for mine, fingers cold, unsteady. I've been thinking, she said, voice almost brittle, about how I raised you two, and where I got it wrong. You don't need to go into all that now, Mom. I do, because you need to hear it from me, not through court papers. She squeezed my hand, or tried to. I let Delphine talk louder than you ever cried. I believed what I wanted to believe about her, that she was struggling, not selfish, that she meant well, even when she didn't show up. I didn't say anything, not yet. I let her keep going. I changed the will, a couple of months ago. Constance helped me file everything. It's legal, final. Her eyes flicked up, searching mine. You're the only one who showed up, Lo, not just at the end. You were here for all the hard parts. You saw me when I wasn't anything close to strong or proud. That's what matters. Not who I gave birth to first, not who posted more photos online. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with acknowledgement. I reached for the washcloth I kept on her nightstand and pressed it gently against her forehead. She closed her eyes under the pressure. I wasn't here for the will, I murmured, or for some grand gesture. I was here because I remember you used to make cinnamon toast when I had fevers. You'd bring it to my bed with ginger ale and sit with me till I fell asleep. She opened her eyes again, glassy now. I wasn't always good to you, she whispered, but I see you now. I need you to promise me something. Okay. Promise me you won't let her rewrite this. Not the will, not the truth. Don't let her make me a liar when I'm gone. My throat tightened, but I nodded. I won't let her erase you either. She nodded back. Her hand rested in mine a while longer, her breath slowing. When I finally left the room to grab her soup, she had already drifted off. She never finished that bowl. It stayed on the nightstand until the next morning, untouched. Back in the guest lounge, present day again, I folded the photo of the hospice schedule and placed it carefully back into my wallet. I ran my fingers over the worn edges. She promised she wouldn't let her be erased, and now, neither will I. The morning after the funeral, I poured my second cup of coffee before the first had cooled. The house was quiet. Too quiet for someone who'd just buried her mother and hosted 70 guests who barely remembered her name. My inbox was full of payment confirmations, floral invoices, and a thank you note template the funeral home had auto-generated with Delphine's name pre-filled. Of course it was. I was sitting at my desk going through receipts when I heard a knock on the door. Not a buzz or a doorbell chime, just 3 firm raps. That rhythm that says, I didn't call first because I don't care. I stood slowly, the weight in my chest already telling me who it was. I opened the door, and there she was. Sunglasses, no makeup. Hair pulled back carelessly like she'd rolled out of bed and decided not to try too hard. A weathered hoodie hung off her shoulders, sleeves pushed up like she wanted me to think she'd been working. She hadn't. Can we talk? She said, voice low, like she was the one walking on eggshells. I didn't invite her in, just leaned my shoulder against the doorframe and waited. She cleared her throat. I've been thinking. Look, you got the will, you got everything. I got nothing, not even Mom's jewelry. You know that wasn't fair. I didn't blink. She kept going. All I'm asking is a little help with rent. You've got your online store, your savings. Mom gave you the house. I'm not trying to fight, okay? I'm in a tight spot. You mean the spot you made for yourself? I asked, flat. Her mouth tightened. You think I deserve this? Really? After everything? I didn't respond. She took my silence as permission to keep digging. I mean, Mom never said you were perfect. She told me plenty of times you were cold, controlling, hard to love. You think this little Florence Nightingale routine makes up for how you've always looked down on me? I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me, so we stood face to face. You came to my door after stealing my name, my credit, and my grief. You think asking for money erases that? She raised her chin. I just thought you'd be decent enough to remember we're family. I folded my arms. You remembered that too late. She scoffed. You really think Mom would have wanted this? Us like this? You keeping everything while I beg for scraps? She didn't want this. That's why she changed the will. Delphine's jaw clenched. You think that makes you the hero? No, but it makes me the one who showed up. That was the end of it. She turned without another word and walked off my porch like she hadn't just torn open the ugliest parts of our past. 2 days later, she texted, I'll be at Brit Cafe at noon, if you change your mind. I went. It was a neutral place, not far from downtown. I picked a booth by the window. Delphine walked in 10 minutes late, wearing lipstick this time, as if that would make her case stronger. She didn't order, just sat down and got straight to it. I know we're not close, she began, but you and I both know Mom played favorites. I had my issues fine, but you never forgave me for needing help. You didn't need help, I said. You needed an audience. That stung. I saw it flash across her face, just for a second. You don't even need the money, she snapped. This isn't about Mom. This is about punishing me. No, I replied. This is about you lying again. This is about you still using her name, like it owes you something. She rolled her eyes. God, you're so sanctimonious. Always have been. Just say it. You want me to suffer. I shook my head. I just want you to stop taking things that aren't yours. She stood. This was a waste of time. Then she was gone. Later that evening, I checked my mail. A cream envelope with the bank's logo caught my eye. I opened it while standing by the kitchen sink. It was a final statement from Mom's credit card. Her name still printed on top. Maureen Greaves. Charges dated just 48 hours earlier. $43.20 to Uber Eats, $96.50 to Sephora, $19.99 for a monthly wine box. Same card, same account. But Mom had been dead for over a week. The IP address tied to the charges? Delphine's apartment. I didn't gasp or cry. I didn't even feel shocked. She didn't just ask, I said quietly. She stole again. I sat down at my desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed Constance. Her voice came through on the second ring. Lorianne? I need to talk, I said, about credit card fraud, on an account that should have been closed. There was a pause. Then Constance said, I was wondering when you'd be ready to stop protecting her. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew in that moment. I wasn't protecting her anymore. I was protecting what Mom left behind. Not just the house or the finances, but her wishes, her trust. This time, she won't just lie and walk away. not if I stand in her way. 2 days after I called Constance, I woke up to a ping from my phone that didn't feel like any other notification. It wasn't a message or email. It was a live video alert. The title caught my eye before I even opened it. My Truth as a Daughter, What They Don't Want You to Know. I didn't need to guess who had posted it. I watched from the kitchen counter, still in my pajamas, coffee cooling in the mug beside me. There she was, Delphine, on Facebook Live, sitting in her car, tears streaming like she had practiced each one. Her voice cracked perfectly, just enough to sound believable to people who didn't know her. "I never left Mom's side," she said into the camera. "I gave up everything to be there for her. And now my own sister is trying to make me out to be some kind of criminal." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I know what real love looks like. I saw it in Mom's eyes every day. Not once did she say she didn't want me around." The comments started rolling in fast. "Stay strong. You were always the better daughter." "Some people only show up for the money." Hearts floated across the screen like confetti at a pity parade. I didn't react, not outwardly. I just walked over to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out the USB drive I had saved months ago. The hospice logs, time-stamped, signed, dated, sealed. Every visit, every shift, every day she didn't show up. I didn't upload anything yet. I just set the drive beside my laptop and sat there, letting the weight of it all settle into my chest like a stone. Later that afternoon, I checked the Facebook group my neighbor had added me to last year, Fresno Families United. I hadn't opened it in months. This time, the posts were waiting for me. "Anyone else uncomfortable with how the younger daughter handled the memorial? I heard she didn't even arrive on time to the funeral. So disrespectful. My cousin worked at the care center, said she was cold to everyone, especially her mom." I stared at the screen. My name wasn't in the posts, but it didn't have to be. The intention was clear, and it spread fast. The notifications piled up. Direct messages from strangers. One said, "God sees everything, even if the courts don't." Another, "If my mom died, I wouldn't be so smug." I didn't respond. I didn't block them. I just let the silence sit for a while. That night, after dinner, I opened my laptop and wrote a single email to Constance. No intro, no fluff, just attachments, hospice rotation schedule, medical invoices, a log of every visitor, proof that Delphine's name never appeared in the final 90 days, and one sentence, "I'm ready to defend my truth." The next morning, I wrote a public post, not on my personal page, but on the same group where they'd dragged my name through the digital mud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was plain, measured, clinical. While my mother was dying, I didn't have time to rehearse anything. I was busy taking care of her. Some people perform for sympathy, others just do the work. Attached were photos, notes, time logs, all dated, all real. I disabled comments before I hit post. I didn't refresh the page. I didn't read reactions. I left it there like a plaque in stone. No argument, no explanation. Later that day, I saw Delphine's response. A screenshot from her live video. Captioned, "When the truth hurts, some people run to spreadsheets." The likes poured in. I didn't care. Let her gather her audience. I had my records, and soon I'd have something else. That evening, while sitting on the porch with my tea, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a stranger, it was Constance. "Do you still want to move forward?" she asked. "Because if you do, I can have the paperwork filed by Monday." I looked out at the street, quiet, dusky, the day cooling into something calm. "Yes," I said. She wanted attention. Now she'll have all eyes on her in court. The next week moved fast, like time was trying to outrun the truth. I stayed off social media, stayed off group chats, stayed off anything that echoed Delphine's voice, but what I didn't stay off was official channels. I watched the case build from my laptop, page by page, timestamp by timestamp, like stacking bricks around a house that had been left open too long. It was Thursday morning when I got the alert. An automatic email from the county clerk's office. Property transfer request. Filed under Maureen Greaves. I clicked, scrolled, and there it was. Filed under Delphine's name. Marked as sold. The date of sale, 2 days ago. The buyer, listed as a private cash party. The seller's signature? Maureen's. I stared at that signature for a long time. I knew every curl of Mom's writing. This wasn't hers. It was similar, but off. Slanted wrong, looped too smooth. Like someone had practiced. Delphine had only ever seen Mom's signature once. I remembered clearly. It was on a tax return Mom had asked me to help with 2 years ago. Delphine had hovered, asked about a refund she wasn't entitled to, watched as Mom signed at the bottom. It hit me then, not just the gall, but the plan. She'd been waiting to use that moment for something like this. I printed the documents. Then I called Constance. We met the next morning in her office. She had already pulled the file before I arrived. When I walked in, she motioned to a chair and placed a thick binder between us. "Brace yourself," she said. "I've been holding on to this since before your mother passed." She opened the binder. Inside were 3 key documents. The first, an updated will, notarized, naming me as the sole legal beneficiary. No split, no shared ownership, just my name. The second, a log signed by a third-party notary, proof of the meeting, the time, the state of mind. No coercion, no confusion. The third, a sealed envelope, my name on the front, Mom's handwriting. I stared at it for a few seconds before picking it up. I broke the seal. "To the one who stayed when staying cost everything," it began. My hands didn't shake, but my throat tightened as I read. "I know this isn't a prize," the letter went on, "but it's a way to say I saw you, even when I didn't always act like it. You earned more than a house. You earned peace, and I want to give you as much of it as I can." I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into my purse. Constance cleared her throat. "Now," she said, tapping the folder, "you want to press forward with fraud, or hold this back for leverage?" "I want her exposed," I said quietly. "No more soft landings." Constance nodded. "Then we'll file under both estate fraud and identity misrepresentation. And when the house listing goes public, because she will try again, we'll have everything in place." That afternoon, I sat with a probate attorney, filed the fraud report, and submitted copies of the forged documents, my mother's signature samples, and the Facebook harassment archive. Everything Delphine had touched, twisted, or tampered with was now evidence. By Monday morning, Delphine had been served. I didn't call her. I didn't respond to the voicemails. But I saw her panic online, passive-aggressive status updates, vague posts like, "Some people forget who family really is," and "I never asked for much, just not to be erased." She always had a flair for victimhood. I spent the next day cleaning the house. The kind of cleaning where you throw out things you didn't realize you'd been holding on to. Pill bottles with expired prescriptions, a shawl that still faintly smelled like Vicks, hospital forms crumpled at the bottom of drawers. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I just made space. By sunset, I was out in the yard, watering the rosebush Mom used to sit beside every spring. I looked up at the windows of the house. This house she wanted to leave to someone who wouldn't turn it into a transaction. I whispered, "It's not revenge, it's restoration." And I meant it. This wasn't about punishing Delphine anymore. This was about correcting the record, about honoring the woman who, at the end, had seen things clearly, even if it had taken too long. She used lies to take what wasn't hers. Now the truth will take it back. 3 days passed after the summons had been served. Long enough for the shock to wear off, but not long enough for Delphine to sit with it. That morning, while making labels for shipping orders in the kitchen, I noticed my dashboard was acting strange. At first, it was a handful of refund requests, nothing that raised a flag. But by noon, they came in waves. Canceled orders, strange usernames with no history, multiple chargebacks logged within hours. I clicked through messages. They weren't about product defects. They weren't even from real buyers. They read like a coordinated attack. Liar. You steal from the dead. Scamming people under your mother's name? Classy. My heart didn't race. I'd learned by now to go still before reacting. I cross-referenced the complaint emails with the spam tracker Constance had once told me about. The source? An IP linked to an old domain, delphinecarowrites.com, her defunct blog from 2018. She hadn't posted in years, but apparently the login still worked. By evening, Etsy had flagged my store. They'd pause my payouts for manual review, pending verification, so that's how she wanted to play it. The next morning, a neighbor sent me a text with a screenshot. Hey, thought you might want to know. Your house is on Craigslist, again. I followed the link. My stomach turned. A full listing. Charming 3-bedroom bungalow, cash only, no agents, serious buyers only. Priced at $89,000. Laughable. The market value was double that. But it wasn't the price that hit me. It was the contact number. I recognized it. Jaren's prepaid phone, Delphine's son. I called the number. It rang twice, then straight to voicemail. Hi, this is Jay. Can't pick up. Text me. I didn't text. I called the city records office instead. As expected, no legitimate sale had been filed. No MLS listing. No permission to sell. She wasn't trying to sell the house. She was trying to make it look unstable. Unclaimed. Confused. Like something caught in probate limbo, so someone, somewhere, might bite. I tried calling Delphine. Blocked. By early afternoon, I was behind the wheel, driving to the apartment she'd moved into 6 months before Mom passed. The one she'd claimed was just temporary until she got back on her feet. I parked down the street and walked up the worn steps. The complex was quiet. Midday sun beating down. Not a car on the block. She opened the door halfway. No greeting. Just her eyebrows lifted like she'd been expecting me. You're fast, she said, arms crossed. Figured it might take you a week to find the ad. You can't sell something that isn't yours, I said. I'm not selling, she replied. Just testing the waters. No harm in gauging interest, right? It's fraud. It's Craigslist, she said with a shrug. People post garbage every day. You can't sue over curiosity. I stepped closer. You forged a signature, filed false paperwork, and now you're trying to scare off any potential legal interest in the house. You think I don't see the pattern? She smirked. You can't sue for a house if no one will buy from you. There it was. The slip. The intent. You tried to erase me at Mom's funeral, I said quietly. Now you're trying to erase her home. That ends here. She leaned against the doorframe. You always act like you're above it all. But we both know, deep down, you love being the martyr. I turned away without responding. Back at home, I took screenshots of the Craigslist listing, saved the HTML source, logged the time, sent everything to Constance and the estate's fraud liaison. The reply from the clerk was short and to the point. Active violation of standing injunction, escalating to judicial enforcement. I sat in my office with the curtains half closed, the light outside starting to soften as the day began its quiet retreat. I wasn't angry, not the kind of anger that needed yelling or slamming drawers. I cleaned the living room instead, folded blankets, watered the plants, moved my mother's favorite chair a little closer to the window. That night, I prepared a small dinner, ate alone, and turned my phone to silent. I wasn't avoiding the noise. I was choosing not to participate. Delphine wanted me scattered. She wanted me unraveled. She wanted me to lash out, make mistakes, prove her narrative right. But I'd been through enough to know that real strength doesn't shout. It acts. She thought playing dirty would keep me quiet. But I've learned to fight fire without burning myself. By the time the weekend rolled in, my phone had gone blissfully silent. No more fake buyers. No petty emails from strangers who believed a curated live stream. No more late-night Craigslist listings. I kept everything forwarded to Constance. I didn't have the energy to answer pettiness with more pettiness. Sunday night, just past midnight. I was about to plug in my phone and turn out the lights when a message lit up my screen. The name stopped me. Joran Caro, Delphine's son. He'd never reached out to me directly before, barely spoke at the funeral. I hesitated before opening it. Hey, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I remember you being with Grandma every day when she got bad. You were the one who helped her sleep. She told me that once, that you helped her breathe easier. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, heart not racing, but quietly folding inward. Then came the next message. I don't know what's true anymore, but thank you. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The next day, I received an invite for a family lunch organized by Mom's cousin Claire. She had mentioned wanting to do something more personal, less performative than the funeral. A chance for the family to talk without the pressure. I almost declined. But I went. It was held in a small event room at a quiet restaurant in downtown Fresno. White tablecloths, pre-printed menus, a simple photo of Mom framed by the door, this time with no edits. Just her. Laughing. Wrinkles visible, makeup slightly smudged. Real. I walked in 5 minutes early and was greeted by polite nods and half hugs. Claire came over and squeezed my shoulder. I'm glad you came, she said softly. Delphine showed up 20 minutes late, wearing heels and a smug expression. She made her rounds quickly, smiling, laughing too loudly, correcting people who didn't recall details quite right. No, it was me who brought Mom her favorite soup when she was at home. Lorian had work that day, I think. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. We sat through lunch, chicken marsala and iced tea, when the conversation turned toward Mom's final months. A few people said the usual. She had such strength, or she never complained. And then the room quieted. A voice at the far end of the table broke the lull. Aunt Melba. She hadn't spoken much all lunch. She was in her 70s now, sharp as ever, and didn't bother with pleasantries. She stood, slowly, and rested her hands on the back of her chair. I want to say something, she said, before anyone else spins this story into something it's not. Delphine's fork stopped mid-air. I visited Maureen often, not every day, but enough, and we talked. More than you might think. She looked directly at Delphine. She told me, months before she passed, my younger daughter is my witness. If anything's left of me, it's her. A silence spread like spilled wine. She said Lorian was the one who saw her, Aunt Melba continued. Saw her in pain, saw her fears, saw her truth. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. Delphine didn't speak. Her face drained of color. Someone at the table, maybe Cousin Rachel, murmured under her breath. We always wondered why Delphine didn't visit. The weight of the room shifted. Conversations became fragmented. Delphine left her seat. No scene, no comment. She just stood and walked out. Joran followed her silently, not meeting anyone's eyes. I stayed. Afterward, I walked the few blocks home alone. The sky was clear, just warm enough to carry the scent of spring. I passed a small florist's cart outside a corner market. The lilies caught my eye, bright white, just beginning to open. I almost bought them, but instead, I kept walking. At the cemetery gate, I stopped, reached into my purse, and pulled out the folded note I'd written earlier that week. I taped it to the gate softly, right below the bronze nameplate. You're not gone. You're just no longer in her shadow. And I meant it. For the first time, I felt no need to prove anything. Not to the family, not to the town, not even to myself. The record was correcting itself, organically, word by word, from people who had seen things unfold. It wasn't justice yet, but it was beginning. One more step, and the story she wrote about me would finally be undone. In court, in record, and in memory. The courthouse hallway smelled like freshly waxed tile and faint printer ink. I sat on the wooden bench outside Department 9B, hands resting on my lap, fingers still. Constance sat beside me, flipping through a file she had already memorized. Across the hall, the door creaked, and Delphine stepped out, alone. No attorney, no folder, just her purse and sunglasses, even though we were indoors. She glanced my way, but I didn't meet her eyes. I looked up instead, toward the ceiling, toward nothing in particular. Maybe toward Mom. The bailiff called us in. The room was nearly empty, no jury, just a judge, a clerk, and 2 witnesses who wouldn't need to speak. It was procedural. Clean. But my heart moved slow in my chest, like it knew what this meant. The judge's tone was steady, firm, without edge. He spoke as if he'd seen this 100 times and knew exactly how it would end before it even started. This court upholds the validity of the 2023 revised will. All assets named within are to be transferred to Ms. Lorian Blythe. The estate is settled. Court adjourned. That was it. I heard Constance whisper, "It's done." I stood, not fast, just enough to feel it in my knees. I walked out without looking back. I didn't need to. Outside, reporters waited. Not many, just 2 or 3 local faces with cameras. One asked if I had a statement. "There's no statement," I said, my voice calm. Just closure. They didn't press. When I got home, the sun was beginning to drop behind the neighbors' trees. The porch light hadn't come on yet. I stepped onto the welcome mat and noticed something taped to my front door. An envelope, no handwriting on the outside. Just taped neatly, sealed. I opened it inside at the kitchen table. A photo. It was the original from Mom's last birthday, the one Delphine had cropped for the funeral. But this was the full image. All 3 of us. Mom in the middle, me on one side, Delphine on the other. I had taken that picture with the timer and balanced the phone on a napkin dispenser. There was no note inside the envelope, nothing written on the back, just the photo. I didn't cry, I didn't frame it. I placed it in the drawer with Mom's last letter and closed it gently. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But not in a haunting way, more like a room that had been cleaned after guests overstayed their welcome. A text from a mutual acquaintance came through the following Friday. "Did you hear? Delphine got evicted. Joran's living with his dad now. She started a GoFundMe, but no one's donating." I didn't respond. The following Sunday, I bought lilies from the same florist stand I had passed a dozen times without stopping. I walked to the cemetery just after noon. It was warm but not hot, and the air held that kind of stillness you only get in spring when everything is beginning again. I knelt at Mom's grave, brushed away some dried leaves, and placed the lilies in the holder at the base of the stone. I didn't speak, not out loud. I just taped a new note behind the headstone, tucked low enough that only I would know it was there. "You chose me when it mattered, that's enough." And it was. I took the long way home, past the park where she used to walk before her knees gave out, past the corner bakery that had always overpriced the coffee she loved. The sidewalks weren't crowded. My phone buzzed a few times. I didn't check. Back on my porch, I sat with a blanket over my knees. A breeze caught the edge of the wind chime by the door, setting off a soft, clinking rhythm. My phone pinged again. I picked it up and smiled, just a little. A new order had come in for the handmade tea towels I'd listed the week before. Simple, embroidered, stitched with quotes about grace and strength and legacy. They weren't flashy, but they were mine. I opened my laptop and began typing a blog post I'd been working on in my head for weeks. When you're erased long enough, you start believing you were never there. But I was. And now the world knows it too. I paused, then added one last line. Justice doesn't fix everything, but it gave me back my name. Hello, my name is Felicity. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, things would eventually get better. That being the good kid, the obedient one, would protect me. But silence didn't save me. It buried me. My stepmom smiled to the world while she shoved me into the dark. She told the neighbors I was unstable. She told my dad I was manipulative. She told me, no one will hear you. But what she didn't know is that someone did. Why would a teenage girl need a watch that could send an SOS? And how many times had she used it before anyone even noticed? Why was the basement always so cold and so quiet? Would you believe me if I told you this wasn't the first time I was locked down there? Would they have believed me at all if the watch hadn't spoken first? I remember the rain that evening, not heavy, not wild, but steady. It felt like the kind of rain that knew how to settle in your bones. The streetlights outside flickered through the grayness, casting a dull amber glow against the kitchen tiles. It was September in Everett, Washington. School had just started again, and the trees were beginning to surrender to fall, their green fading into a reluctant yellow. I was sitting at the kitchen table, barely touching my dinner. Across from me, Verena didn't say a word. Her fork clicked lightly against her plate, every motion deliberate. She hadn't looked at me since we sat down. Dorian had left that morning for a 3-day business trip to Spokane. He said he'd be back by Saturday. He always said that like it was a promise that fixed everything. The silence in the house was nothing new, but that night it felt sharper, tighter, like a rope being pulled on both ends. I wasn't trying to make noise when I reached for the salt shaker. My elbow just brushed the rim of the water glass too close to the edge. The crash it made as it hit the floor was louder than it should have been. Water and glass exploded outward like a firecracker had gone off under the table. Verena didn't flinch. She just stood up slowly, walked over to the cabinet near the fridge, and opened the drawer where she kept the basement key. I froze. "Really?" she said, voice flat. "Again?" "I'm sorry," I stammered, already on my knees, picking up glass shards with my bare hands. "Don't worry," she continued, closing the drawer quietly. "It's not about the glass, not really." I paused, looking up. "It's about the ring," she said, now facing me. "What ring?" I asked, confused. She raised an eyebrow like I'd just insulted her. "The ring my grandmother gave me, the one that's always in the dish near the sink. It's gone." I stood slowly, still holding a piece of wet napkin. "I haven't touched it." "Of course you haven't," she said. "You never touch anything. You never take anything. Nothing is ever your fault." I knew that tone. It wasn't anger. It was preparation. She was building a story, and I was the villain in it. "Verena, I didn't take anything." "You've been disrespectful to this house for months. You think you're smarter than everyone. You think I don't see the way you look at me." She took a slow step toward me. "You think you're better than me because you were here first?" "No?" She held up a hand. "It's fine. You need time to think. Let's go." I took a step back. "Go where?" "The basement." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten me. She just turned and walked toward the hallway. I followed. Somehow, my feet obeyed her faster than my mind could protest. I should have run. I should have called someone. I should have done 100 things. But my legs moved like they belonged to someone else. When we reached the door, she turned around, eyes unreadable. "I'd like to say this hurts me," she whispered, "but I think you need to know what silence feels like." She opened the door. "No one will hear you." Then she shoved me. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the first step. Before I could turn, the door slammed shut behind me. I heard the lock twist. Then nothing. Pitch black. No light from anywhere. The air down there was different. Wet. Thick. Like something had been rotting in the corners. It smelled like old cardboard and mildew and a kind of cold that never left. I tried to steady myself, one hand on the wall as I took the steps slowly. Halfway down, I missed a step. My foot hit nothing, and I crashed forward, scraping my knee against the concrete. My palms broke the fall, but it didn't stop the sting from creeping up my spine. I lay there for a second, face against the damp floor, too stunned to cry. Then I sat up. I couldn't see anything, not my hands, not the steps behind me, just black. I sat with my arms around my knees, pulling them in tight. My breathing was shallow, each inhale a quiet plea not to panic. I'd been down here once before, when I was 13. I remembered the way the cold floor had made my stomach cramp, the way hunger had clawed at my ribs by morning. That time, Dorian had been out of town, too. Verena told him I had locked myself in during a tantrum. He believed her. I didn't cry. I don't cry in front of her. Not anymore. But I whispered, "Is this just punishment?" I said aloud. "Or is this who she really is?" My voice didn't echo. It just vanished into the air, swallowed whole. Then I remembered the watch. I'd worn it every day since Aunt Illyria gave it to me, a little square screen with a pink silicone strap. I wore it because it tracked my steps, because it buzzed when I had texts, because Aunt Illyria said, "If you're ever in trouble, hold the side button for 3 seconds." I reached for my wrist. It was still there. My fingers were trembling. I pressed and held. 1, 2, 3. The watch vibrated once. Then a tiny red light started to blink at the bottom of the screen. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It wasn't loud. It didn't ring or make a sound, but it was blinking. That meant the signal went out. Maybe. I stared at it in the dark, the faint glow the only thing I could see. "Please," I whispered, "let someone be listening." The red light blinked again, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the dark. I kept my eyes on it, not because I expected it to do anything more, but because it was the only thing down there that proved I still existed. Everything else, the concrete walls, the silence, the cold, made me feel like I'd already been forgotten. I didn't move for a while. I didn't dare. I was scared that any sound, any shift in weight on the stairs, would bring her back. Verena was unpredictable when she felt cornered. I learned that the hard way, like the time she locked me out in December without a coat because I'd rolled my eyes. As I sat there, legs tucked up under me, the weight of the day collapsed onto my shoulders. I tried to piece it all together, what I'd said, what I'd done. How had I ended up here again? Had it been the broken glass? Was it the way I didn't look up fast enough when she spoke? 2 days ago, I forgot to take out the trash. Maybe that was it. She always found a reason. A week ago, Dorian, my father, had looked at me strangely after dinner. His fork still hovered above his plate when he asked, "Did you remember your meds today?" I blinked. "I don't take meds." He looked confused. "Verena said you've been on something for your moods, for focus." There it was, that tiny crack in trust, and I hadn't even seen it happening. Verena had been planting seeds behind my back, little hints that I wasn't stable, subtle jabs masked as concern. She told neighbors I was going through a phase and told Dorian I'd been lashing out. I should have seen the setup coming, but I didn't, because who wants to believe their stepmother is waging a quiet war against them in their own home? The watch buzzed again. I nearly dropped it. A faint glow spread across the screen. A message appeared. "SOS received. Stay still. Help is on the way." For a moment, everything inside me crumbled. I felt it in my throat, in my chest, in the way my shoulders shook just slightly. It was the first time in months, maybe years, that I felt like someone was listening. Maybe Aunt Illyria got the signal. Maybe she was already on the phone with someone. Maybe. But a dark thought clawed its way up. What if this was a test? What if Verena knew I'd press it? What if she set this up to see how far I'd go? She was clever like that. She liked to play the long game. The buzz was followed by silence. No more updates, no confirmation. I stared at the screen, waiting for something. Anything. Then, footsteps upstairs. Slow. Steady. A knock. I held my breath. I couldn't hear words, just the rise and fall of Verena's voice through the floorboards. Calm, cheerful, casual. The kind of voice she used when chatting about wine at a PTA mixer. The door shut. Footsteps retreated. No one came to the basement. My stomach sank. Had they left? Did she talk them away? Did they believe her? Panic bubbled in my chest. I pressed the side button again on the watch, even though I knew it was pointless. One press wouldn't send another signal. It had already gone out. I wrapped my arms around my legs again and leaned my head back against the wall. That was the thing about Verena. She knew how to sell the story. Everyone loved her. She baked for the block parties. She laughed too easily, too loudly. She wore pearls when she hosted. She was PTA perfect, and I was just the moody teen still mourning a mother nobody else seemed to miss. People saw what they wanted to see. Even Dorian. She made him feel chosen. That was her power. She stepped into the space my mom left behind and filled it so well that even I almost believed she belonged. There was a time, maybe 3 months after she moved in, when I tried calling her mom by accident. She laughed, said it was cute. She never let me forget it. Another flash of memory. One night last year, I stayed home sick from school. I'd barely eaten, had a low fever, and just wanted to sleep. Dorian came home early. Verena met him at the door, arms crossed, smile tight. She skipped school. Again. What? He said. She's fine. I told her if she's going to fake it, she needs to do a better job hiding the laptop. He looked at me. I tried to explain. My face was flushed, my hands shaking. He didn't believe me. She lies about everything, Verena said, her voice calm and disappointed. And he nodded. That was the night I stopped trying to explain myself. I looked down at the blinking light on the watch. Still glowing. I didn't know who saw it. I didn't know if anyone would do anything. But for the first time, I wasn't just waiting. I pulled the watch strap tighter around my wrist, not because it was loose, but because I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel something that was still mine. Even if no one believed me, even if they left again, I wouldn't stay silent this time. I heard movement above again, quicker now, not the same slow saunter from earlier. This time, the footsteps didn't turn away. They were coming straight for the basement. There was a pause. Whoever was coming stopped right at the other side of the door. I held my breath so tightly I could hear the pulse thudding behind my ears. For a second, I thought the knob would turn. I thought maybe, just maybe, the door would creak open and this would all end. But the knob didn't move. Nothing happened. Silence again. I sat perfectly still at the base of the stairs, the red light on my watch blinking faintly beside me. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator upstairs and the occasional creak of old wood. Someone had been there, but they left. Or they were still watching. Waiting. I didn't have time to guess which. The quiet gave my mind permission to wander, though I wish it hadn't. My thoughts crawled back to a winter I'd tried hard to forget, 2 years ago, before Verena even moved her things fully into the master bedroom. It had snowed that night, heavy enough to coat the back porch in a thick white sheet. I'd been late getting home from school because the buses were running slow, and when I walked in, soaked to the bone and shivering, Verena was waiting with a towel in one hand and a question in the other. "Where were you?" she asked, lips tight, eyes flat. "The bus was delayed. The snow—" I started. She shook her head and walked toward the kitchen, her voice cutting sharp through the air behind her. "You're always full of excuses." That was the night I ended up in the basement for the first time. Back then, the bulb hanging from the ceiling still worked, but barely. It flickered like it couldn't decide whether to help or haunt. There were cardboard boxes piled along the walls, some half open, filled with things from my mom that Verena said she was sorting through. She never did. The smell of mildew had already started to creep in. She left me there with no coat, no blanket, and no way to call anyone. I curled up behind an old folded ping-pong table and waited for the morning. The next day, when Dorian returned from a late shift, I told him. I told him everything. And he stared at me like I'd accused the mailman of murder. "She told me you got upset and locked yourself in there," he said. "Said you were having one of your episodes." I remember standing in the hallway, dripping from the melting snow still caught in my shoes, and thinking, he really believes her. That was the night something in me started to fold, not break, not yet, just fold inward, quietly. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I would talk back, when I'd shout, slam doors, demand to be heard. But that never worked. It only made her dig in deeper. She was strategic. On my 15th birthday, Verena hosted a small gathering in the living room. Dorian had invited 2 neighbors, a couple of his work friends, and her sister's family. She baked a cake, store-bought but passed off as homemade, and made sure everyone had something to drink. She even gave a toast. But when the chairs were being set up, she pointed to the far corner by the fireplace. "You can sit there," she told me, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "That way, you're not in the way when people walk through." I sat there the whole evening. Nobody noticed, nobody asked. That same year, when we sent out the holiday card, it was a photo of Dorian, Verena, and her niece sitting in matching sweaters on the porch. My name wasn't on the envelope. The card said, "Warm wishes from our home to yours, the Harrisons." It wasn't my home anymore. Not really. I pulled my knees closer to my chest, the dampness from the basement floor seeping into my jeans. My fingers ran along the cracks in the concrete near the bottom stair, tracing old, uneven lines carved into the surface. At first, I thought they were random scuffs, but then I recognized them. Chalk. I leaned closer, squinting at the faint lines and numbers. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. I'd done this. I was 13, and Verena had locked me down here for nearly 3 days once. I marked the wall each morning with a piece of sidewalk chalk I'd found near the laundry pile. Dorian was on a conference trip that time, too. When he came back, I said nothing, because I knew she'd tell him I was lying. Looking at those chalk lines now, I felt something twist in my gut. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. This wasn't punishment anymore. This wasn't a time out. This was removal. I wasn't being disciplined. I was being erased. Verena didn't see me as a stepdaughter. She saw me as an inconvenience, a threat to her carefully curated reality. Every time I spoke up, every time I stood my ground, she twisted it into another example of how unstable I was. Dorian wanted peace. He didn't want to question the woman who cooked dinner, organized his sock drawer, and always knew the right thing to say when guests came over. And I had made it easy for him. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my palms. The air in the basement was heavier now, as if it had absorbed the weight of what I'd remembered. In the corner, by a stack of broken storage bins, I spotted a snapped-off plastic handle. It had once belonged to a tote full of Christmas decorations. I picked it up and walked to the center of the floor. Then I crouched down and dragged the handle through the dirt, drawing a thick, straight line across the floor. "This is the last time," I whispered. Not because I expected someone to hear me, but because I needed to say it out loud. I sat back against the wall, the line in the dirt stretching before me like a marker between the girl I had been and the girl I needed to become. From upstairs, I heard the doorknob rattle. Then her voice, too calm, too sweet for what she'd done, dripped through the cracks in the floorboards like poison in honey. "Sweetheart," Verena called, "why don't you come out now?" She didn't yell. That would have made too much sense. No, Verena spoke through the door like she was inviting me to brunch. "If you just behaved," she said, her voice smooth and steady, "we wouldn't be here." I didn't answer. My back was against the concrete wall, legs pulled up to my chest, arms wrapped tight around my knees. It wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the performance. The way she made it sound like this was mutual, like this moment had been negotiated between two consenting adults, like I had chosen this. I could picture her on the other side of that door, probably barefoot, leaning slightly on the doorframe, face soft. Maybe she had a glass of wine in one hand. That was her favorite trick, being calm. She didn't yell, didn't threaten. That wasn't her style. Her weapon was sugar-coated reason. It made everything she did seem justified, even locking a child in a basement. "If you could just learn how to talk like a normal person," she added, "this wouldn't keep happening." My heart pounded against my ribs, not from fear, but from fury, cold and quiet and ready to burn. I kept my lips pressed together, but inside I was screaming. This wasn't discipline, this wasn't punishment, this was survival. I remembered the school counselor. I was 14, and we'd had an assembly on emotional safety. Afterward, the counselor pulled me aside in the hallway. I don't even remember what I'd said. I must have looked pale, or tired, or something. She asked if everything was okay at home. I said something like, "Sometimes I don't feel safe." She nodded, took notes, asked if I wanted to talk in private. That was the only time I almost told. Verena showed up at the school the next morning, smiling wide, holding a plate of lemon bars, said she was there to donate snacks to the counseling office and check in on Felicity. She chatted with the front desk staff, complimented someone's haircut. By the time she left, I was just another moody teenager over-dramatizing a grounded weekend. After that, I kept everything inside. But not Aunt Illyria. I thought of her now. how she never fell for Verena's soft edges. Illyria lived in Portland, far enough to be out of the day-to-day, but close enough to stay in my life. Every birthday, she sent handwritten letters. Every video call, she looked me in the eyes. She never asked if I was being good. She asked if I was being heard. The watch she gave me wasn't expensive. It didn't have GPS or video, just a small emergency alert feature buried in the settings. When she handed it to me last Christmas, she said, "If no one listens to your voice, let data speak for you." At the time, I thought it was a poetic way of saying, "Stay in touch." Now I realized she knew. I glanced at the screen again. 22% battery left, still blinking, still quiet. The screen had dimmed, but the red icon at the top corner gave me something to hold on to. With a trembling thumb, I tapped through the menu and typed a short message. Still locked. I hit send. Then I listened. Upstairs, Verena's footsteps moved away. A pause. Then laughter. Short and sharp, not real. I heard her voice on the phone, all sing-song and bright. "Yeah, no, everything's good here," she said. Silence. Then more fake laughter. Felicity's staying with her aunt for the weekend gave me a little break. Lord knows I needed it. My stomach turned. She was covering her tracks in real time. She walked past the basement door again. I heard the faint creak of the kitchen window being pushed open. The scent of lavender fabric spray wafted down, probably spraying it over the sofa cushions. The illusion of peace had to smell like something. A knock echoed upstairs. I froze. From the window, I could barely make out the muffled voices. A man, deep-voiced. Then Verena, bubbly and apologetic. "Oh, you must be thinking of last weekend," she chirped. "She came back for her book bag. I wasn't home, so she just waved at you and left. You know teenagers." A pause. "She's with Illyria now, down in Portland. I can text her if you want." The man mumbled something I couldn't catch. "No, no need," she said quickly. "Thanks for checking, though. Really." The door closed. Her heels clicked softly across the hardwood floor. I sat frozen for a full minute, processing the truth. She lied without hesitation, without blinking, without conscience, to neighbors, to friends, to the people who would vouch for her when everything fell apart. I stood slowly, legs stiff from crouching too long. My knees cracked. The air felt heavier again, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done waiting. I started pacing. From one side of the basement to the other, arms crossed, heart pounding. "You think no one hears me?" I said softly, to the shadows around me. "But someone will." I wasn't sure if I was talking to her or to myself, but the words felt like armor. I took another deep breath and stared up at the wooden beams above me. They'd been part of this house longer than I had. They'd heard more truth than anyone upstairs ever had. I whispered again, firmer this time. "I'm not staying quiet anymore." And just then, my watch vibrated. Not a message, not an alert. A live signal. It was faint at first, a vibration so subtle I nearly missed it. But it was there, steady, real, alive. I looked down, and the watch screen lit up. Live connection active. My hands trembled as I held the display closer to my face. Then a voice, small, slightly distorted but unmistakably human, came through the tiny speaker. "Felicity, this is Officer Torres. If you can hear this, help is on the way." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. I'd been quiet for hours, but this was the first silence that didn't make me feel invisible. It was happening. Somebody knew. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from the sudden flood of something I hadn't dared to feel in days. Validation. All the gaslighting, the whispered insults, the subtle digs. "You're too sensitive. You always take things the wrong way. Stop acting like a victim." None of it mattered in this moment. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Someone on the outside believed me enough to connect. Verena didn't know. Upstairs, she still moved like she owned the house, like everything was fine. The faint sound of a sitcom laugh track reached down into the basement. I could picture her stretched out on the couch, phone in one hand, a glass of wine in the other, legs tucked up under that ridiculous cashmere throw she always showed off at holiday parties. If the police were already tracking the signal, they had my location. They knew I was still in the house. I pressed my hand against the cold concrete wall and whispered, "I warned you." Not out of spite, but out of truth. This wasn't fear anymore. This was resolve. She could hum her way through the evening. She could straighten the kitchen towels and wipe the countertops, but she couldn't clean this up. Not this time. My fingers tightened around the edge of the watch strap, and that small defiance, it grounded me. Of course, this wasn't the first time I'd tried to fight back. Years ago, I'd recorded her once, her voice rising in that syrupy, cruel tone she used when no one was around. I'd hidden my phone in the laundry basket, hit record, and let it capture everything. When she found it, she didn't scream, she didn't scold, she smiled, took the phone, walked to the kitchen, and slammed it against the tile floor until the screen cracked, then split, then shattered completely. Then she knelt beside me. "Try that again," she said, "and it won't be the phone that breaks next time." I didn't try again. Not until now. The difference. This watch was always on me, always part of me. She didn't think twice about it. Just another teenage gadget to mock. Her mistake. I adjusted the sleeve of my sweatshirt to cover the blinking screen and sat back on the bottom step. My ears strained for sounds beyond the walls, laughter from the TV, ice clinking in a glass. A door opening, maybe the fridge. I didn't know how long it would take for help to arrive, but I knew one thing. She wasn't in control anymore. Not fully. My heart nearly stopped when I heard her voice again, this time from the kitchen, more forceful, impatient. "Dorian," she said on the phone, louder now. "I'm telling you, she's doing it again." There was a pause. Then she laughed, but it was forced. "No, she's not actually stuck. She put herself down there. She locked the door from the inside. She's trying to guilt me." Another pause. Then softer. I know, but this has been exhausting. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Drag her out kicking and screaming? That'll just make it worse." I imagined him on the other end, tired from travel, looking at a hotel wall, nodding without listening. His answer came, muffled but clear enough. "Just try to keep things calm, Verena." She smiled into the phone. I didn't see it, but I knew the expression. "Always do," she said sweetly. And then she hung up. That was her safety net. The man who trusted her because she kept his shirts pressed and the living room clean. A knock came minutes later. 3 sharp taps, not frantic, not urgent, but purposeful. I stiffened. Footsteps above, the scrape of her chair, the click of heels across the tile. The door opening. "Hi there," Verena said, voice dripping with hospitality. "Can I help you?" A male voice responded. I couldn't hear the words, just the rhythm of concern. Then came her answer, light and airy. "Oh, no, it's just me here tonight. My stepdaughter is visiting her aunt in Portland. You must have seen her last week." Pause. "She came home briefly yesterday, grabbed her book bag, and left again. You probably just missed her." My stomach churned. The man must have said something else because her tone turned just a touch firmer. "I appreciate the check-in," she said, "but I assure you, everything's under control." The door closed. My jaw tightened. The seconds crawled by. Then the front door creaked open again. I stood. Each step up the basement stairs felt like I was pushing through quicksand. When I reached the top, I raised my fist and pounded against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. "I'm here!" I shouted, voice cracking, but clear. Silence. The kind that doesn't come from quiet, but from shock. I backed away from the door, heart racing. Somewhere upstairs, someone had just heard something they weren't supposed to. And for the first time in 2 years, I heard something in Verena's voice that I'd never heard before. Panic. Her voice cracked, just barely, but it was enough. Enough to tell me she wasn't in control anymore. I stayed still, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to hear her fall apart. After years of listening to her pretend, hearing even one edge of panic slip into her voice felt like justice knocking early. I was still standing at the top of the basement steps, my hand hovering near the doorknob. It didn't open. Instead, I heard the rustle of hurried movement, her slippers against the hardwood, the creak of floorboards she always told me to avoid when guests were over. Then her voice again, lower this time, almost a hiss. "Felicity, don't you dare make this worse for yourself." She was trying to recalibrate, to reel the situation back in like she always did. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence I gave her now was louder than any argument I could have made. I heard her shift again. "What are you even trying to do?" she whispered, more to herself than to me. "There's no one here. They're not coming." "You're just trying to embarrass me." It was too late for that. The performance was unraveling. The scream I had let out minutes earlier had cracked the stage lights wide open. For the first time, her voice couldn't cover the truth. A pause. Then the key turned in the lock. The door opened slowly, inch by inch, as if she hoped the delay would erase what had already happened. She peeked around the corner and smiled, tight and controlled. "There you are," she said, like we'd just bumped into each other in the hallway. "Honey, what are you doing down there?" I didn't move. "Come upstairs. You've had your little moment. Let's not be dramatic." Her tone was too even, too soft. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and met her eyes. "Don't call me that." She blinked. "What?" I said, "Don't call me that." She clutched the doorframe a little harder. "Felicity, you're blowing this out of proportion." I took a step up. "You locked me in here." Her face changed, just a flicker. She tilted her head and offered the practiced frown. "That's not true. You were upset. You wanted to be alone. I respected that." Another step. "You shoved me. Stop twisting this." Her voice jumped half an octave. We both heard it. So did the people outside. Another knock. She spun around, startled. "Ma'am, police department," a voice called through the front door. "We're following up on a wellness alert. Could you open the door, please?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted to me, then back toward the living room. I stepped forward again, my voice low. "They heard me." She glanced toward the basement like she might slam the door again, lock me back in, pretend nothing had happened. But she couldn't. We both heard the knock turn into a fist. "Ma'am, this is a serious request. Open the door now." She backed up, still holding on to her version of the story like it might save her. "I'll handle this," she said. And then she was gone, up the stairs, through the hallway, down to the front of the house. I followed slowly, keeping just enough distance to avoid her reach, but close enough to watch her unravel. From the kitchen, I heard her voice, falsely bright. "Officers! Hi, sorry, it took me a minute." "Step away from the door, please," one of them said sharply. "Oh, of course, it's just a misunderstanding. Everything's fine here." A beat. "Ma'am, we need you to back up. We're coming in." "Wait, that's really not necessary. You're scaring." The wood cracked. The door crashed open. For a moment, everything froze. Even Verena. She stood there in her cardigan and pearls, hands half raised in mock surprise, mouth open just wide enough to feign concern. Flashlight sliced through the hallway. Two officers stepped inside. One held a tablet, eyes scanning, the other focused on Verena. "Is there anyone else in the house?" the younger one asked. She started to answer, but I stepped into the doorway behind her. "I'm here," I said. They turned to me. "Are you Felicity?" one asked. I nodded. Verena spun, face pale. She's making this up. She does this. She gets dramatic." The lead officer walked past her without flinching. "Can you come with me, ma'am?" He reached for my arm, but not in a forceful way. I followed him through the hallway, past the kitchen, into the living room where two more officers were entering through the side entrance. Behind me, Verena kept talking. "She's always been unstable. Ask her father. She lies. She lies all the time." But no one was listening to her anymore. One of the female officers, older and calm, gently guided me to the couch. She knelt down beside me, pulled out a notepad. "My name is Officer Torres," she said. We received an emergency signal. Can you tell me what happened? I nodded. She locked me in the basement. I pressed the SOS on my watch. She looked down at my wrist. May I? I held it out. She tapped the screen, read the notifications, then her eyes flicked to the log history. She didn't say anything at first, but I saw her expression tighten. You've had this watch for how long? About 9 months. My aunt gave it to me. She tapped again, scrolled through the data. It's been logging distress signals, heart rate spikes, audio spikes. Movement patterns showing confinement. Another officer came over with a camera and began photographing my wrists, which still had faint red marks from where I'd struggled earlier. She's been down there more than once, he muttered to Torres. I know, she replied. I sat still as they collected evidence. They moved through the house with measured urgency, opening doors, photographing rooms, checking locks and windows. Verena was now seated in a dining chair, guarded by another officer. She kept muttering about misunderstandings and trying her best, but the words weren't sticking anymore. Torres crouched in front of me again, softer this time. You fought smart, she said. That watch probably saved your life. I blinked, and for the first time in so long I let myself breathe. The sound of Verena's voice clawed through the station hallway as the door closed behind her. Something about lies, something about betrayal, but her words didn't land anymore. Not here. Not now. Officer Torres gently guided me to a quieter room near the back of the precinct, her hand steady on my shoulder. It was the first time in 2 years that someone touched me without suspicion or manipulation. I didn't know how much I needed that. Verena, meanwhile, was shouting behind us as officers escorted her to holding. She's manipulating you. She's always been good at that. Just ask Dorian. I didn't flinch. Torres didn't blink. We just kept walking. Inside the small, softly lit room, a female officer handed me a bottle of water. I didn't realize how dry my throat was until it touched my lips. Take your time, Torres said, sitting across from me. But we need to go over some things together. Can you stay with me? I nodded. She took out a tablet and gestured to my wrist. May I sync your watch to our system? I extended my arm. My fingers felt numb, like they belonged to someone else. Torres connected the device and waited while the data uploaded. The screen showed the last 9 months of logs, heart rate spikes, audio recordings, timestamps, movement tracking. My chest tightened just seeing it laid out like that. All those moments when I thought I was alone, screaming into a void, had actually been captured by something I wore like a second skin. You've been preparing for this, she said, almost to herself. I nodded again. I didn't trust my voice just yet. She tapped the screen a few more times, scrolling through graphs, examining patterns. Then she turned the tablet toward me. These spikes, she pointed out, occur at almost the same times, weeks apart. Same dates Dorian was out of town, same duration, same heart rate surges. Her voice was calm but clear. Do you know what this means? It means, I said slowly, that I wasn't making it up. It means, she replied, you were never the unstable one. She stood, motioned to another officer, and asked them to begin reviewing the audio files. The room filled with the soft hum of equipment, beeps from scanners, and low voices organizing the evidence. A few minutes later, the first file played. Verena's voice cut through the room like a serrated knife. You want to act like a little brat? I'll treat you like one. You think anyone cares what you think? Click. Another clip began, my voice, faint and shaking. Please, I didn't do anything. I just forgot to text back. I didn't mean... Slam. Verena again. If you ever open your mouth about this, I'll make sure you regret it. Understand me? I looked down at my hands, now folded in my lap. Nobody in the room spoke for a while. No one needed to. Then the door opened. A familiar voice, shaky, older, guilt clinging to every word. I heard what happened. I need to talk to someone. I turned slowly. It was Mary Beth, the housekeeper who used to work with us when my mom was still alive. She had left not long after Verena moved in, said it was too much for her. I'd always wondered why she never looked me in the eyes when she left. Now I knew. Officer Torres stepped out into the hall with her, and they talked quietly for a few minutes. When they returned, Mary Beth's eyes were red. "I should have said something sooner," she began, barely above a whisper. "I saw things, not everything, but enough. Times when Felicity was locked in her room, times when I heard crying from behind the basement door. I never believed what Verena told me, not really. But I didn't push back. I told myself it wasn't my business." She looked right at me. I was scared of her, but I'm more ashamed that I didn't speak sooner. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because hearing someone finally admit it, that they'd seen it, that I hadn't imagined it, gave me something stronger than tears. It gave me ground to stand on. Torres thanked Mary Beth and walked her out. Then she came back, this time with a printed copy of the audio files and a folder filled with my watch's data. She laid it on the table like a shield. "Are you ready to talk now?" she asked. So I did. I told them everything, every incident, every bruise I'd covered up with sleeves, every time Verena told me to be a good girl and keep quiet, every time Dorian looked away because he didn't want the truth to ruin his comfortable illusion. I talked for over an hour. My voice cracked a few times, but I didn't stop. When I was done, Torres looked me in the eye. "We believe you," she said. Outside the room, I could hear Verena's voice rising again. "You're making a mistake. She's manipulative. She's not innocent." Another officer's voice, cold and firm. "That's enough, ma'am." There was a shuffle, the sound of handcuffs tightening, a door buzzing open. Torres stood and walked with me to the hallway. A moment later, Verena passed by. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time, she looked scared, not outraged, not superior, scared. They led her past the reception desk toward the holding cell. She was still talking, still spinning stories, but no one was paying attention. The charges came in quickly after that: child endangerment, false imprisonment, obstruction of justice. They read them aloud, one by one, and all I could think about was how small her voice sounded in the echo of the hallway. When they walked her away, I didn't smile, I didn't cheer, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt like the air around me belonged to me again. It wasn't a celebration, but it was justice. He stood in the doorway like a ghost, still wearing his work coat, briefcase dangling from one hand, eyes wide and unfocused. Dorian didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, then at Officer Torres, then at the stack of printed transcripts in her hands. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat had gone dry the moment he walked in, like my body knew this was the moment I had both prayed for and dreaded. He finally breathed. I didn't know. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't defensive, but it wasn't an apology either. He sank into the chair across from me, and his fingers, those same hands that used to lift me onto his shoulders when I was 5, the ones that steadied my bike without training wheels, shook as they reached for the folder Officer Torres handed him. "This is everything we've compiled," she said gently. "From her smartwatch, from audio logs, from your former housekeeper. You should read it." All of it. I watched his eyes skim the first few lines. His face paled when he reached the transcript marked Deck 14 Basement Audio. Verena's voice filled the air again through a clip. "She's nothing but a burden, Dorian. You just don't want to admit it." He flinched. He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't ask if the audio was doctored. He didn't try to rationalize. That silence, that long, echoing silence, was its own confession. When he finally looked up at me, the weight in his eyes was heavier than anything I had ever carried, and I had carried a lot. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't want to see it." That was the part that hurt more than the basement door, more than the isolation. It wasn't that he hadn't seen. It was that he chose not to, over and over again. "I know," I said softly. It was the only thing I could say that didn't burn. He stood and walked toward the glass wall of the precinct's hallway. Through it, he could see Verena in the holding cell, her face red, eyes puffy, pacing like a caged animal. When she saw him, she ran to the window. "Dorian, thank God, you know me. You know I wouldn't—" Her voice cracked. He didn't move, didn't nod, didn't flinch. "Please," she pleaded. I did this for us. For our peace. I was protecting our life, our home. Don't let her twist this. Still, he didn't respond. She banged on the glass. You're just going to turn your back on me? He turned his back on her. 3 days later, he filed for divorce. The paperwork was swift. The evidence, irrefutable. The court granted me a temporary restraining order, then a permanent one. Full custody was transferred to him, but only on the condition that I agreed. They asked me in chambers, "Do you want to live with your father again?" I looked at him. This man who had let so much happen, who had believed a woman's warmth over his daughter's bruises. But he had shown up. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for in the beginning. Yes, I said. Verena's charges escalated as the DA received more files. Her lawyer, some well-dressed guy who probably thought he could spin this into family drama, quit the case after listening to 10 minutes of audio from the basement. I overheard him in the hallway on his way out. She should be in prison, not court. At the sentencing hearing, she didn't speak. She just stared ahead like she still couldn't believe any of this had happened to her. But I spoke. They asked if I wanted to say anything before final judgment. I walked up to the stand, notes in my hand, but I didn't look down at them once. I don't want revenge, I said, voice steady. I want safety. I want silence that isn't rooted in fear. I want to live without looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next lie will be told about me. I want to belong in my own home. The judge nodded. You're remarkably composed, she said. Thank you for your courage. I stepped down and sat next to my father, who hadn't stopped wringing his hands the entire time. Weeks passed. We packed up the house on Maywood Lane together. He asked if I wanted to keep anything. I said no, not a fork, not a lamp, not a photo. I want a fresh start, I told him. We moved into a modest apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't fancy. The walls were thin, and the neighbor's dog barked too much, but it was ours. There was no basement, no rooms with locked doors, no cameras hidden in stuffed animals, just a 2-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture and a calendar we remembered to flip together each month. He cooked dinner every night. Nothing complicated, usually grilled cheese or spaghetti, but he always asked what I wanted. He listened now, not just to my words, but to the pauses between them. The way I shifted in my seat, the hesitation in my voice. You never have to earn peace, he told me one night as we ate on the balcony. And for once, I believed him. Some nights, I still wake up with my heart racing, my hand pressed against my wrist where the old watch used to be. It's not fear, not exactly. More like my body still checking in, still bracing for a door to slam, or a voice to rise just outside the bedroom. My therapist says it's normal. Trauma doesn't keep a clock. Healing isn't linear. It circles. It echoes. You're safe now, she tells me every time. Let your nervous system learn that. I believe her. Most days, the nightmares have become less frequent. But they still come, slipping in through the cracks when I forget to double-check the locks or when a familiar scent pulls me backward into that basement. The silence there was a monster all its own. Thick, alive, oppressive. It taught me how to hear my own heartbeat and count the seconds between breaths. I carry it with me, not as a burden, but as a reminder. Silence can be dangerous, but sometimes silence can be power. It took time, but I found my voice again, not by shouting, not by demanding the world to hear me, but by telling my story on my own terms. At first, it was a blog, just a simple site with no photos, no real name, just words. I wrote about what it felt like to be disbelieved, what it felt like to know something was wrong and have no one say it out loud. I shared small moments. I talked about the watch, about how it vibrated in the dark like a heartbeat from someone far away, about how it gave me a sliver of hope. Then I started posting clips. Edited audio from the recordings. Nothing graphic, just enough. I attached context. I explained how I had learned to document, how the tech helped save my life when words weren't enough, and people responded. Comments started coming in. Quiet at first, then steady. I thought I was crazy too. This happened to me, but no one believed me either. You made me feel less alone. I read every one. Dorian would peek into my room sometimes and ask, "Still writing?" And I'd nod. I didn't need to say anything more. He never pushed. When Aunt Illyria visited that spring, the whole apartment seemed to breathe differently. She stayed for a week, slept on our worn-out couch, took long walks with me, helped rearrange the kitchen even though it barely fit two people standing side by side. One evening after dinner, Dorian looked at her across the table and said, "You saved her." Illyria took a sip of wine and shook her head gently. "She saved herself," she said. "I just gave her the tools." It was the first time I truly believed that. We laughed that night. Real laughter, the kind that fills a room and lingers long after you stop. It felt foreign at first, but I didn't push it away. Months later, Verena's trial came to a close. She was sentenced to 15 years, no parole for 10. The courtroom was full, but she kept her eyes on the floor during the verdict. Not once did she look at me, but I looked at her. I met her eyes as the judge finished reading the sentence. I didn't need her apology. I didn't want her to flinch. I wanted her to see me, really see me, for the first time. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said. She blinked, just once, then looked away. Back at the apartment, I kept the old smartwatch in a wooden box on my bookshelf. I couldn't wear it anymore. The scratches across the screen made it hard to read, and the strap had been replaced so many times it barely held, but I didn't throw it away. I bought a newer model, not because I was scared, but because I respected what the first one gave me. It was never just about the alerts. It was the proof. It was the data. It was the quiet witness when no one else would listen. "It helped me tell the truth," I once wrote, "when I didn't know how else to be heard." These days, I spend my weekends volunteering at a teen advocacy center downtown. I help other kids understand their rights, how to document, who to call, when to trust their gut, even if the adults around them say otherwise. I don't tell my story unless I'm asked, and even then, only the parts that matter. The point isn't my pain, it's the path out of it. I help one girl draft an exit plan after weeks of her school counselor brushing her off. I sit beside another as she tells her grandmother the truth for the first time. I don't rescue them. I don't promise them it'll be easy. But I give them something I once had to claw for. A mirror. A map. A little red blinking light in the dark. At night, when the apartment is quiet and the city hums outside our window, I sit by the open balcony door with a cup of tea and let myself think. About all the versions of me that didn't make it here. The one who stayed silent. The one who believed she was the problem. The one who almost gave up. They're all part of me. But they're not the end of the story. They thought silence was my weakness. But it was my strength. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming my place in my own home. Light filters through the sheer curtains in my bedroom, landing on the bookshelf, warming the corners of the room that used to feel cold. This space, it's mine now, and I finally feel safe in it. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most wear the warmest smiles, but truth has a way of surfacing, even in silence. What Felicity's story reminds us is that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes, it means you're watching, collecting, waiting for the moment when truth can finally speak louder than lies. Have you ever been silenced by someone who was supposed to protect you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true, powerful stories like this one. I'm Kala. On my parents' anniversary, I gave them a gift. Something meaningful, something that cost me years of hard work. They laughed, called it useless, until they saw the apartment deed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been cutting me out long before that dinner. Bit by bit, erasing my name from family photos, stealing my future, even forging documents to take what was left of my father's legacy. So how did it get that far? How does a daughter become a stranger in her own home? Let me tell you what really happened. Because it didn't start at that dinner. It started the day my dad never came home. The invitation came through a short, impersonal text. No greeting, no warmth. Just, 15th anniversary dinner, La Mirabelle, 8 p.m. sharp. Be decent. I stared at the screen for a full minute, reading it over again as if some part of me expected a second message to follow. Maybe a softer tone, hope you'll come, or even, dare I dream, we'd love to see you. But there was nothing else. That was Delora's style. Straight to the point, dressed up in silk and sequins, but emotionally threadbare. I didn't reply, just marked the date on my calendar and closed my phone. Not because I wanted to go, but because I needed to see it. The final performance, the last show. Some part of me craved the closure that had been withheld for years. La Mirabelle was the kind of restaurant that screamed elegance to people who'd never actually experienced it. Faux crystal chandeliers, oversized wine glasses, and menus written entirely in French, with prices that were more about status than substance. I walked in wearing a classic navy dress, nothing flashy, just clean lines and quiet grace. I didn't need sparkle. I was there to watch them shine and burn out. They were already seated in a private dining room at the back, laughing too loudly, sipping wine like it was celebration and not spectacle. Delora sat at the head of the table, glittering in silver sequins that caught the light and demanded attention. Gideon beside her, red-cheeked from too much Cabernet. Lyra and Bran flanked them, looking smug and overpolished. Delora looked up, gave me a quick once-over, then smiled with razor-thin lips. "Oh, you actually came." She leaned toward Lyra and added just loud enough, "I figured she'd send one of those Hallmark cards again." I pulled out the small box from my bag, a gift wrapped in minimalist paper with a dark velvet ribbon. Subtle, understated, just like the life I had built. I handed it to her with both hands, steady. "Happy anniversary." She took it like it might bite. "It's tiny," she muttered, already laughing. "Well, let's see what our little prodigal daughter thinks is worthy of our 15th. She tore the ribbon with the kind of dramatic flair she'd save for a stage play, flipped the lid off, and stared inside. Silence, for a moment. Then, laughter. Her head tilted back. "A deed?" she scoffed. "To what?" "A storage unit?" Gideon chuckled. "Probably to a one-bedroom over a liquor store." Lyra leaned in. "Is this a joke?" Bran didn't say a word, but the smirk on his face did enough damage. I stayed calm. "It's a luxury apartment in Cherry Creek, fully paid off. It was meant for you, but I've changed the name on the deed." You could feel it, the shift, a ripple under the skin of the room. Their faces froze, not in awe, not in gratitude, but in discomfort, in disbelief that I could possibly be someone now, without them. Delora's eyes narrowed. "Why would you give that to me?" "I thought you might appreciate it," I said, "until I remembered who you are." She slammed the box shut. "Don't pull this holier-than-thou crap, Calla." "You think success erases how you left us?" Gideon added. "You've got a big mouth for someone who disappeared when things got tough." I didn't flinch. "I left when you made it clear I didn't belong." I stood up slowly, pushed my chair back without a sound. "Enjoy the dinner." I didn't wait for them to stop me. No one did. I walked out, the velvet box still on the table, the ribbon dangling like a loose thread from a life I no longer wanted to stitch myself into. That night, my phone lit up nonstop. Delora. "I may have overreacted. We should talk." Lyra. "Hey, about that internship thing you mentioned. I've been thinking maybe we could start over." Bran. "Look, family fights. But it's stupid to let this get in the way of helping each other." I blocked them all. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't that girl at the table anymore. I was done performing. This wasn't the beginning. This was the ending I needed to begin again. I didn't always know how to walk away. But it started the day my father never came home. I was 13. It was a Tuesday, I think. The kind of day no one would remember unless something terrible happened. And something did. That morning, my dad kissed me on the forehead like he always did. the scent of his aftershave lingering as he walked out the door. "Be good, sweetheart," he said with a wink, keys jingling in his hand. I smiled, still clutching my cereal spoon. Delora sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up, didn't say goodbye. He hesitated for a second, then left without a word from her. I remember thinking it was strange, just a flicker of unease, quickly brushed away. By lunch, he was gone. They pulled me out of math class. The principal's face looked like she'd been practicing her expression in the mirror. "Your mother is here," she said softly. Her voice was syrupy, too sweet. Delora sat in the office chair, legs crossed, makeup immaculate. Not a single smudge under her eyes. Her tone was flat. "Your father passed away at work. Heart attack." That was it. No hug, no tears. Just a hand on my shoulder, barely a pat. My whole world cracked in that moment, and she didn't even flinch. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls in our house were paper thin. Delora didn't care. She never lowered her voice when it mattered. I was on the stairs when I heard her talking to someone on the phone. Laura, I think. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I didn't have to. "Honestly, this might be for the best," she said, her voice hushed but sharp. "Being a widow sounds a hell of a lot better than being divorced." My breath caught. "No lawyers, no splitting assets. I keep everything." Then she laughed. Laughed. "Of course I'll cry at the funeral. I've already picked the dress." My stomach twisted. I covered my mouth with both hands, afraid a sound might escape. In that moment, something inside me shifted. A thread snapped, not loudly, but with quiet finality. The funeral was exactly what she promised. Delora wore a black dress that hugged her like she was on the runway, not in mourning. People kept coming up to her, saying how strong she was, how brave. "She's keeping it together so well," one woman whispered. "She's always been the practical one," said another. No one noticed that she didn't cry. Not once. Not even when they lowered the casket. But Ruth did. Aunt Ruth stood near the back, lips pressed tight, arms crossed. She watched Delora with narrowed eyes and didn't say a word to her the entire day. 4 months later, Gideon appeared. He came over for dinner, dressed in some stiff blazer like he was there for a job interview, not to meet the daughter of his new conquest. Delora greeted him with a laugh I hadn't heard since before Dad died. Lyra and Bran were with him, smiling like they'd just won a prize. The smell of roast chicken filled the house. Real food, actual effort. She hadn't cooked like that in years, not even when Dad was alive. That night, the table was full, the lights were warm, and I felt like a guest in my own home. "Calla," Delora said, her voice sugary sweet, "we have an announcement." I already knew. I could see it in the way she touched Gideon's arm, how her eyes gleamed with some twisted kind of victory. "We're getting married!" Everyone clapped. I forced a smile so tight it hurt. "That's great! Congratulations," Gideon looked at me like he was sizing up a stranger. Lyra beamed across the table and said, "We'll be like sisters." I wanted to scream. Instead, I picked at my potatoes and said nothing. From that night on, things moved quickly. Too quickly. She stopped mentioning Dad's name altogether. Gideon's photo joined the mantel where my father's used to sit. I remember asking once, quietly, cautiously, "What did you do with Dad's picture?" Delora didn't even look up. "We're starting a new chapter, Calla. Don't be so dramatic." She replaced the past like changing out furniture. Lyra got my old stereo. Bran took over the garage for his video games. Gideon's truck filled the driveway. Their lives took up space until there was none left for mine. And still, no one saw it but me. They thought she was rebuilding. I knew she was erasing. It started with a wall. One afternoon, I came home from school and stopped short in the hallway. The picture frames that used to hold photos of me and my dad. Our trip to the lake, the science fair he cheered me through, that blurry one where I had chocolate all over my face and he was laughing, were gone. In their place were new frames. Larger, shinier. A staged family portrait of Delora, Gideon, Lyra, and Bran, all dressed in matching colors. One of Bran at his football game, another of Lyra holding a trophy I didn't know she'd won. I stood there for minutes, frozen. Like if I waited long enough, the old pictures would reappear. They didn't. That night at dinner, I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. "Where are the photos of Dad and me?" Delora didn't miss a bite of her salad. "I'm updating the house," she said. "It's time we moved forward. You should too." Gideon nodded, as if it made perfect sense. "No use living in the past," he added, reaching for his wine. "But those weren't just pictures," I whispered. "They were him." Delora sighed, setting down her fork. "Calla, don't be so sentimental. Everyone loses people. It doesn't mean you stop living." From that day forward, I stopped asking questions. A few weeks later, my playroom, my sanctuary filled with books, old board games, and half-finished puzzles, was emptied. Lyra stood in the middle of it, with paint samples and brushes, grinning. "This is going to be my studio," she said. "Mom says it's time I have my own space." I stood in the doorway, heart pounding. "That was my room," Lyra shrugged. "You don't even use it anymore. And besides, Mom said you need to learn to share." Bran got the sunroom, the one Dad promised we'd turn into a reading nook. He turned it into a gaming cave, the door always locked, snacks spilling onto the carpet. When I tried to talk to Delora about it, she barely looked up. "Don't be selfish, Calla. They're adjusting, and we need to make them feel welcome." I started eating dinner in my room. One morning, the family calendar had something scribbled in pink glitter pen. "Lyra's party." I stared at the date. It was mine, my birthday. I waited all day for someone to say something. Anything. A happy birthday, a card, even a pat on the back. When I got home from school, the house was filled with balloons. Streamers dangled from the ceiling. A cake sat on the counter that read, "To our shining star, Lyra." Delora turned to me, mid-toast, smiling like a politician. "Oh, Calla, honey, I completely forgot. Yours is today too, right? Or is it tomorrow?" People laughed, assuming it was all in good fun. I slipped away before the candles were lit. That night, I found a cupcake in the fridge, left over from some store-bought pack. I lit a match from the junk drawer, stuck it in the frosting, and sang "Happy Birthday" under my breath. That was the night I started writing. I found a plain spiral notebook and tucked it under my mattress. I wrote to Dad like he could still hear me. Told him about the empty frames, the quiet dinners, the way it felt to be erased while still living under the same roof. "They took your face off the walls," I wrote, "but I still see you. I still hear your laugh in the mornings, even when the house is silent." Over time, the entries became less about them and more about me. What I felt, what I feared, what I hoped no one would ever know I hoped. I stopped speaking unless I had to. I didn't slam doors or cry where they could hear. I just floated, like a shadow in the corners of a house that used to be mine. "If they won't see me," I wrote once, "I'll make sure the world does." And from then on, I did my best to fade from their lives, while quietly building the one they never expected I could. I thought keeping quiet would keep me safe. But silence didn't shield me. It only made it easier for them to twist the story. The first time it really hit me was during Lyra's senior art fundraiser. Delora had given her an envelope with several $100s to submit for her materials and competition fees. The envelope vanished the same day. By that evening, I was standing in the kitchen, backpack still on one shoulder, when Delora stormed in like a hurricane. "Where is it?" she demanded. "Where's what?" "Don't play innocent, Calla," she snapped, pointing a finger like a prosecutor in court. "The envelope, the one with Lyra's tuition money." My heart dropped. "I didn't take anything." "Of course you didn't," Lyra said, arms folded, eyes gleaming. "Just like you didn't throw out my brushes last month." "That wasn't me!" Delora crossed her arms. "Just admit it. You've always resented her. I'm not blind, Calla." I looked at Gideon, who barely glanced up from the TV. Bran stayed upstairs. No one cared. No one even asked if there was any proof. The next morning, Dolores still hadn't calmed down. "You know what hurts more than the money?" she said, stirring her coffee like it personally offended her. "Knowing I can't even trust my own daughter." The envelope turned up 3 days later, in Lyra's art bin, folded under some sketches. No apology, no correction. Delora just waved a hand. "She's under a lot of pressure. You're strong, Calla. She's fragile." That sentence landed like a stone. Not because it was cruel, but because it was deliberate. They wanted me to swallow it and move on. So I did. But a piece of me lodged it somewhere deep, where the things that never got resolved went to rot. At school, things didn't get better. They got darker. It started with whispers. A few snickers in the hallway. I noticed people looking at me, then looking away too quickly. Then someone in English class said, "Didn't think you were that kind of girl, Calla." I didn't know what they meant until I saw it. An Instagram profile with my full name, my face, and posts I'd never made. Bitter captions. Photos that were edited to look suggestive, like I was desperate for attention. A message thread with someone I didn't even know, full of flirty replies I never sent. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I knew who it was before I even asked. Lyra had that kind of creativity. Twisted, personal, effective. I found her in the school parking lot. "Why?" I asked. She tilted her head, smiling. "Maybe you should ask yourself why people believe it's you." I showed Delora the account. Her response? A shrug. "It's just teenage drama. Everyone goes through this. Grow up." "Someone is impersonating me." "Oh, please. You're acting like it's identity theft." "Because it is." She rolled her eyes. "If you spent half as much time fixing your attitude as you do blaming your sister, maybe things would be different." That's when I stopped trying to explain. My voice didn't carry weight in that house, or anywhere else they touched. At night, I wrote more. I filled pages. Not just letters to Dad anymore, but journal entries. Rage laid out in neat cursive. "I didn't deserve this," I wrote. "But I'll let it mold me. Fire doesn't just destroy, it forges." I no longer expected fairness. I didn't crave approval. I started letting go of the idea that anything I did would change them. So I stopped defending myself. And I started planning a life where I wouldn't need to. It arrived in a thin, white envelope, the kind most people wouldn't even glance at twice. But I knew what it was the moment I saw the university logo in the top corner. My hands trembled as I peeled it open, heart thudding like it hadn't dared to in years. "Dear Calla Morgan, we are pleased to offer you a full academic scholarship." I had to read it twice just to believe it. I sat down on my bed, letter in hand, eyes wide, jaw slack. For the first time in what felt like forever, something was mine, earned, not given. A door cracked open, leading somewhere that didn't have their voices in the next room. I didn't tell anyone that night. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a book on my shelf, and waited for the right moment. I knew they wouldn't be happy for me, but I hoped, some small, stubborn part of me still hoped, they might at least pretend. A few nights later, during dinner, I brought it up. Everyone was in their usual places, chewing, scrolling, ignoring. "I got into West Virginia University," I said, voice steady, "with a full ride." Delora didn't even blink. "For what?" "Business management." Silence. "Who's paying for your dorm?" she said finally, wiping her mouth. "Because we're already budgeting for Lyra's design program." "I told you, it's a full scholarship. Housing, tuition, books." She laughed. "Those scholarships always come with strings. And you? You're not ready for that kind of pressure." "It's not your decision." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Before I could answer, she reached across the table, snatched the letter from my hand. She didn't even read it. She tore it down the center, slow and deliberate, like she was slicing me out of her future. "I'm doing you a favor," she said, tossing the halves onto my plate. "Dreams are dangerous when they don't fit your reality. Bran gave a quiet chuckle. Lyra barely looked up. I stared at the pieces of my future, now limp under a smear of mashed potatoes, and something inside me snapped. But it didn't shatter. It crystallized. I stood up. I won't forget this. Dolores smiled, smug. Good. Then maybe you'll stop wasting everyone's time. That weekend, I packed a bag and took the bus to Ruth's cottage. She opened the door before I even knocked. I was wondering when you'd come. We didn't speak much at first. She poured tea. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to hold it all together. I told her what happened, how Delora tore the letter like it meant nothing. Ruth didn't gasp or rage. She nodded, got up, and disappeared into the back room. She returned with an old manila envelope, yellowed at the corners, thick with something heavy inside. Your father gave me this 3 weeks before he passed, she said, placing it in front of me. He told me to keep it safe, just in case. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a bank statement and a letter in my dad's handwriting. The account had my name on it. The savings were more than enough. He worried about Delora, Ruth said quietly. Said she'd been acting different, cold, secretive. He didn't want your future tied to anyone but yourself. Tears filled my eyes, but they didn't fall. I held the letter like it was life itself. They tried to chain me to that house, I whispered, but my father built a key and left it with someone who actually loved me. That night, I stayed in the guest room. The next day, I used Ruth's address to start applying again, this time in secret. It wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about finally living. They waited until I was barely a month from graduation, as if they needed to remind me one more time that this was their house, their rules, and I had only ever been passing through. Gideon called it a family meeting, but I knew better the moment I stepped into the living room. He was standing beside the coffee table with a folder in his hand. Delora sat stiffly on the love seat, arms crossed. Lyra was scrolling through her phone, but smirking like she already knew the punchline. Sit, Gideon said, voice clipped. I didn't move. He opened the folder. This is a basic asset reassignment form. Legal, straightforward, just a formality. I looked at the header, my name, printed in bold letters, and then the phrase, relinquishment of inheritance claims. What is this? I asked. Delora kept her eyes fixed on the wall. Gideon answered without pause. We're just protecting the house. There's been some legal restructuring. You're 18 now. This is about being responsible. I'm not signing that. His tone sharpened. This isn't optional. You're either with this family or you're out. Lyra chuckled under her breath. She's just mad she won't get a piece. I stared at Delora. She said nothing, not a word. I should have walked away. I should have called Ruth, or a lawyer, or screamed. But I didn't. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. It wasn't consent. It was exhaustion. I signed. The next week, Delora mailed out the family Christmas cards. She didn't show me the final design. I saw it when one of my teachers brought it to school. Look who's all grown up, she'd said cheerfully, handing me the glossy postcard. It read, Happy Holidays from the Vance family, Gideon, Delora, Lyra, and Bran. No mention of me, not even in the fine print. I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled politely and slid it into my bag. At home, I found a whole stack of them in the trash, the extras. They'd ordered 100. When I asked Delora about it, she didn't flinch. You've made it pretty clear you're not really part of this family anymore. One of my aunts left a voicemail. Sweetheart, did you move? We got the card, but your name's not on it. Delora's response? Calla's doing her own thing. She's barely here. She said it like I was a guest who overstayed their welcome. That night, I stood in my room, staring at the walls that used to have photos, the drawers that no longer had meaning. I pulled out the old suitcase from under my bed and began packing in silence. One sweatshirt, a few books, the planner I never let anyone see, a folder of scholarship applications sent from Ruth's address. They thought they could push me out. I was just making it official. I whispered aloud. They erased me from their pictures. But I'll frame my own life. No one heard me. But that didn't matter. The last thing I packed wasn't for school. It was a bracelet I wore as a kid. Silver, worn down, with my initials barely legible on the clasp. I placed it in the top drawer of Dad's old desk. Not as a gift, not as a goodbye, but as a mark that I had existed there. I closed the drawer slowly. I'm not the one who left, I said quietly. You pushed me out. The lawyer slid the folder across the table, his expression unreadable but respectful. All right, Ms. Morgan, everything's in order. Once you sign here, the property is officially transferred. I didn't hesitate. With one stroke of a pen, I gave Aunt Ruth the apartment in Cherry Creek. 3 bedrooms, high ceilings, granite countertops, and more peace than I'd ever known under Delora's roof. She stood by me when no one else did, I said softly. She deserves a home. He nodded, gathering the documents. You understand this is permanent. Yes, I replied. That's the point. When I stepped outside, the Denver air was crisp and dry, the kind of cold that woke you up without biting too deep. I took a breath so full, it felt like my lungs were claiming space for the first time in years. Back at Ruth's, she was already pouring tea. Chamomile, her version of a toast. You sure about this? She asked, though her eyes already knew the answer. She's going to come knocking, she added, setting my cup down. She always does when she starts slipping. I wrapped my hands around the mug. Let her. And like clockwork, she came. 2 days later, a loud, frantic pounding shook the front door. Not a knock, a demand. Ruth glanced out the window, then at me. It's her! I didn't move. Ruth walked to the door, opened it halfway. Delora was already mid-sentence. I need to speak to my daughter. This has gone too far. Ruth kept her tone even. Calla is an adult. You don't just get to appear now and expect access. Delora didn't even blink. I want the account, the money from Franklin. It belongs to this family. No, Ruth said. It belongs to Calla. Your husband left it for her, and you knew that. She wouldn't even have a future without me, Delora snapped. I carried her for 9 months. I fed her. I gave her a roof. Ruth's voice didn't rise, but her words cut clean. And then you used her pain as leverage. That's not parenting. That's possession. Delora pushed past her, stepping into the living room like she still had a right to claim the air. I stood up. If you cared even a fraction as much about me as you do that money, I said, maybe we wouldn't be standing here. Delora's face twisted. You owe me everything. I owe you nothing, I said. You gave me life, and then tried to erase it. She scoffed, turning to Ruth. You turned her against me. I didn't have to, Ruth said. You did that all on your own. Delora's voice cracked, but the anger held steady. You're throwing away your family. I met her eyes. You made sure I never had one. A long silence followed, just the sound of the clock ticking above the mantel. Ruth took out her phone. If you don't leave now, I'll be calling the police. Delora's jaw clenched. She looked at me one last time, as if expecting me to cave. But I didn't flinch. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Ruth locked it, then looked at me with something that felt like warmth and sorrow all at once. You're safe here, she said quietly. You always were, always will be. I nodded, still frozen in place, but I knew she wasn't done, and that the final mask would break soon. The clinking of forks and the hum of fake laughter still rang in my ears as I replayed the moment at La Mirabelle, not with regret, but with clarity. Delora had reached for the box like it was something to toss in her purse and forget. The wrapping was neat, elegant. I'd spent time choosing the ribbon, tying it like I cared. I didn't, not for her, but for the version of me that used to try so hard to matter. When she opened it and saw only a folded piece of paper, her smirk cracked. What is this? A gift card? Did you seriously bring something this cheap to my anniversary? I looked straight at her. It's the deed to a luxury apartment downtown. You were right, it is too much. You don't deserve it. The silence fell fast and heavy. Lyra's jaw tensed. Bran's smirk dropped. Gideon didn't even flinch, just kept cutting his steak like the room hadn't chilled over. Peter raised his glass slightly, like maybe he thought it was a joke. Delora stared at me, eyes wide with a fury she couldn't make pretty. You think money makes you better than this family? I smiled. Number, but it proved I never needed yours. And then I stood up. I thanked the waitress, left the box in the center of the table, and walked out. No one followed me. No one said a word. Outside, the air was sharp, a bite of cold across my skin. But it felt good. Clean. I expected to feel grief, or guilt, or some pit in my stomach that reminded me I was walking away from blood. But I didn't. I felt weightless. Like I'd finally returned everything they'd ever handed me, blame, silence, erasure, all wrapped in a bow and placed right back in their laps. That night, the messages started. First, Delora. I may have overreacted. You always were dramatic, but we should talk. Then Lyra. Hey, about that internship thing? You mentioned it at some point, right? I'm thinking it could look good on my resume. Bran followed. Look, we've had our issues, but family's family. I need a reference. Just write something basic. I read them all while sipping coffee in Ruth's kitchen. She was humming some old tune, watering her succulents like it was just another Tuesday. And it was. For me, anyway. I didn't reply. The next day, the messages came again. Lyra. You're being petty. Delora. You wouldn't even have that apartment if not for me. Bran. You're not better than us, Calla. And finally, Delora. You owe us. After everything we did for you. I blocked every number. Then I posted one photo to my private Instagram. Just a shot of the sky from my apartment balcony, the sun melting into pink and orange against the skyline. Caption: Peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes it roars. That photo said everything I didn't need to explain. That evening, I told Ruth everything. The dinner, the messages, the silence that came after. She didn't interrupt, just poured tea into our matching mugs and waited until I exhaled. You didn't just survive them, she said, eyes soft. You outgrew them. I nodded. I'm not angry anymore. Good, she said, lifting her cup, because this toast isn't to revenge, it's to release. We clinked mugs gently, and as we sipped, I realized I wasn't aching anymore. I wasn't hiding or hoping or trying to fix what was broken before I was even born. I had finally stopped asking to be loved by people who never knew how. And still, part of me wondered, could I ever truly heal from what they didn't give? My mornings are quiet now. I wake to sunlight filtering through soft curtains, water the basil on my kitchen windowsill, and light a candle Ruth gave me from her favorite boutique, the one that smells like rain and honey. No noise, no tension, just the sound of my own breath and the ticking clock I picked out at a flea market last fall. It's a little crooked, a little chipped, but it works. I updated my resume last week and booked a solo weekend trip up to Boulder. A cabin, a trail, no Wi-Fi. I didn't post about it, didn't announce it. It wasn't for anyone else. These days, I keep things close. Not hidden, just sacred. I don't feel the need to prove anything anymore. My life isn't a performance. It's a place I live in fully. Occasionally, emails still come. From Delora. Subject lines like, "Let's talk," or "We're still family," or the last one, "Don't do this to me." They always start the same way, an apology so polished it squeaks. Then come the reminders, the guilt-laced questions. You can't just pretend we don't exist. After all I did, I still deserve to be part of your life. But I don't open them anymore. I don't need to. There's nothing in them I haven't already read between the lines for years. And not reading them, that's my choice now. On Saturday, I drove to Ruth's. Her garden looked like something out of a painting. All soft purples and deep greens and bursts of marigold. She was already pulling weeds when I arrived, sun hat on, a little dirt under her nails. "I brought the lemon bars," I called out. "You know the rules," she said. "No showing up empty-handed or with store-bought cookies." We laughed, the way we always do. We planted mint together, dug our fingers into the soil, and talked about everything and nothing. At one point, Ruth looked up at me, her face calm and kind. "You changed the story," she said. "You didn't just survive them, you rewrote the ending." I didn't expect the tears. They weren't sad. They just came, because she was right, and hearing it from her made it real. Later that night, back at my apartment, I sat down at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. I wrote a letter to Delora, not out of anger, not for revenge, just words that needed out. "I forgive you," I wrote, "but I no longer need you, and that is my freedom." I folded it and placed it in the bottom drawer. I won't send it. It's not for her. It's for me. Mira came by the next morning. She brought iced coffee and a travel guide. We curled up on my balcony, flipping through pages and circling destinations we might visit one day. Italy, Oregon, maybe even Japan. At one point, she asked if I missed them. I didn't lie. "Sometimes," I said, "but not in the way they think." She nodded, like she understood. I looked out at the skyline, soft clouds drifting over the city I'd rebuilt myself in. "Family isn't always who raised you," I said. "Sometimes it's who helped you rise." Mira reached over and squeezed my hand. There's peace in the silence. Not because I've forgotten the past, but because it no longer gets to win. Sometimes the hardest part isn't walking away. It's believing you're allowed to. I spent years thinking love had to hurt, that loyalty meant silence, and that being family meant enduring anything. But that's not true. What I've learned is this: you don't owe anyone a lifetime of pain just because they gave you your name. Healing doesn't always come with loud victories or grand gestures. Sometimes it's found in small things: a quiet apartment, a friend who stays, a garden full of second chances. It's in choosing peace over permission, and most of all, in choosing yourself, without apology. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or unloved by the very people who were supposed to protect you, let me say this clearly. You are not broken. You are becoming, and you get to define what family means to you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who kept taking more than they gave? Or maybe you found your Ruth, someone who showed up when no one else did? Tell me your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this video touched your heart, or let me know where you're watching from. I read every message. And hey, if this video wasn't for you, that's okay too. Let me know why. I'm here to listen. This space is for you, and for all of us learning how to heal together. And if you'd like more stories like this, ones that dive deep, hit home, and maybe even help you breathe a little easier, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Your next story might be the one you didn't know you needed. Until next time, keep choosing peace. You deserve it.